Well, hello everybody. It's rowing chat time again, and after a month's hiatus of my presence, I'm now back in the command chair, and this month my guest is Jimmy Joy. Jimmy and I first met each other, I think around 4 or 5 years ago, with an online dialogue when he approached me about his book, The Mind's Eye. I saw it sitting on a friend's desk and asked if I could borrow it. Got in touch with Jim and said, could Row Perfect sell it? And being the gracious gentleman, of course, that he is, he said yes. Now, Jim's a very, very interesting rowing coach because he has made a feature out of training both the mind and the body. And for me personally, it's a great delight to welcome you here today.
Oh, thank you very much.
So, Jim, tell us a bit more. Who are you and what do you do?
Well, it goes back, my rowing life goes back to 1951 when I started as a tiny lightweight in St. Catharines, Ontario. They came in, the Canadian Henley came in with a new category 135-pound class, and I was a young high school student, and so I went out for crew, barely weighing 120 pounds. So I never coxed, and I rowed for 12 years with the St. Catharines Club. Then I came out of university. I directly went into coaching and teaching, and then eventually professional coaching with universities in the United States. And then in 1980, I went back to Canada to become the technical director for Canadian Rowing. Spent 10 years in Canada, and then returned to the United States to this small town, Geneva, New York, where I coached the Hobart and William Smith crews. It's a coordinate system, men and women coach both crews. And then about 3 or 4 years ago, Hobart asked me to come back as a consultant mentor for the head coach, which now I'm involved with. And after this chat, I'll head out to the practice session this afternoon with the Hobart men.
Fantastic. Well, today we've got 3 different types of questions. We've had some super ideas submitted by the listeners, so thank you to everybody who's taken the time to tell us what they'd like us to ask Jim. They're in 3 groups: technique and drills, psychology, and coaching. So I'm going to kick off with questions about technique and drills. The first one came from Philip from Warwick University in the UK, and he asks, how do you increase speed when a crew already rows well together?
Well, I think there's 2 ways. One, you can do 30-second pieces at the end of a workout. You do 3 or 4 of these, 20 strokes, high strokes. You're trying to get 20 strokes in the 30 seconds. Each stroke has to be monitored. You have to know what the quality of the stroke was for each of the 20 strokes. So it's a mindfulness exercise as well as a quickness exercise. But as a skill, quickness is very, very probably underrated. You've got to try to become quicker, and this is a good way. The other way is by easy speeds, where you take 30 strokes and you try to raise the rate from 28 to 40. And this again is mentally you have to be relaxed. I first did this with Al Morrow's lightweight women's double that was going to the Olympics in 2008, and I could see they were struggling and trying to raise the rate. They were trying too hard, and I just said, use easy speed. And Al said, what? And I said, use easy speed. It's just they have to mentally relax, they have to be physically relaxed, and so it just becomes a mental game where they mentally raise the stroke and physically raise the stroke from the 28 to the 40. And he said, well, tell the crew, and they immediately said, we like it, we really like it. And then he carried that all the way to the Olympics to a 3rd place medal. Using easy speed.
And how frequently did they practice the easy speed drill?
I think you can do that You could do that every day. You could do it as a warm-up. You could do it as a warm-down. At least 3 or 4 times a week, practicing the easy speed, so that they then have that capability in a race, simply to raise that rate, their base racing rate being around 34, 35, and they can raise that rate easily to 40 when they decide to sprint.
Fantastic. And it's always in the practice done at a full slide length.
Full slide length, absolutely, full slide length. And they were struggling. They were really struggling. But when I said this to them, and they said immediately, the stroke person, Cameron, just said, "Well, I really like that." And they took it and they went with it all the way to the Olympics.
Brilliant. Well, that's comfortably answered the question which Tom Copeland also sent us as a diligent reader of your book, The Mind's Eye.
Uh-huh.
In the same book, I also picked up a really interesting anecdote that you tell about some work done by Dr. Ducik in the MIT lab, in which you claim that they found that sweep rowing should use a double-handed feather. Can you tell us more about why that's advantageous and what his testing was?
Well, I can't tell you very much. It's too long ago, but I do recall he came down to practice, and he was a good oarsman himself. He was about 6'3" and 190 pounds, and he was a good oarsman. He was blind in one eye, so he had to cock his head when he was watching the stroke person's oar in 7th. But he came down, he said, "We've proven that the method that you describe with the blade," and it's two-handed, with the blade coming out at 45 degrees, you simply lift the blade out, quarter of the blade out, and then you roll it over to 45 degrees and let it come out. And he said we went into the hydraulic tank at MIT and proved that that was the most efficient way to release. And my recollection, I said, "Thank you very much." This release came from a guy with grade 6 Nova Scotian education. So, but it was proved. They proved it at MIT.
And the idea is once the blade is at 45 degrees, you can then relax your inside hand and it falls onto the horizontal feathered position.
You basically, we're working on it now with the Hobart kids now, is basically it goes, the handle, you go down slightly with the hand, that brings the blade out slightly. And then from there, I mean, you could go out at half blade out, but it's more skill to have less margin of error. So you just go down slightly and then roll the handle onto your fingers, and it's a rolling motion. So it's like a down slightly and away, and then the blade just arcs out, comes out at 45 degrees. And then right onto the feather.
Fantastic. Well, anyone who's listening with a sweep crew who would like to experiment with that and send us their findings, we'd love to tell more people about it in an article.
But it's important to do it with both hands. If you only do it with one hand, then there's a stoppage in the movement. You have more flow to the movement with moving from the elbows, moving slightly down and away, so the handle, the fingers go onto the handle as you extend the forearms.
Okay. That's great. So our next question came from Johan in Dublin in Ireland, and he's asked, should there be any training differences between lightweight and heavyweight athletes?
Well, it's been a while since I trained lightweights at Yale for 6 years, and basically there was no difference. In fact, we were doing more work. That was in the 70s, the late 60s, early 70s, and I at that time took the cue from the East German long distance, and we just did a tremendous amount of mileage rowing. It basically came from the East Germans and from Steve Fairbairn's Mileage Makes Champions. And we did all this mileage, and especially at spring break, we were going 30 miles a day. The trainers thought I was going to kill them, and I said, well, I don't know about that, but we'll see. But it worked out fine. Their hands got torn up a lot, but I don't see that. I don't see the difference. Much like you would train a heavyweight boxer and a lightweight boxer, a bantamweight boxer, it would be the same training. So I don't see the any difference in the training.
Well, that's a very clear answer. Thank you. Now from back stateside, Joe from Sarasota has asked, how do you coach getting an immediate connection after the catch?
Well, that's in the movement. Basically at the time of the entry, you have, and we're working on that now, you have the seat, you have the trunk, you have the blade, and the apex of the knee angle, all coinciding at the front end. That's the start of it, that everything has to be there together at the front end. So trunk, seat, apex of the knee, and the blade have to be there together. At that point, now the drive begins, and in the drive, it's not a segmented drive. I've never accepted that where it goes legs, trunk, arms. Everything goes together, including the kitchen sink, goes together at the front end. This is an integrated drive. And when this occurs, when this is done properly, you feel, not in the legs, you don't feel in the legs, you feel it immediately across the chest and the shoulders. This young woman I'm working with now experienced it the other day, where she had been doing a legs, trunk, arms drive. She was experiencing this feeling across the chest and the shoulders by doing an integrated entry, integrated drive.
How do you teach it, Jimmy?
Well, it's I do one thing I do a lot of quarter slide front end rowing. So it's the hands finishing in front of the knees and really monitoring that. They've got to be exact where they are on the slide bed. Quarter slide, half slide middle, quarter slide back end. So you do this quarter slide front, so the knees are up. The knees barely go down and they release. So you do a lot of that to get it started as a uniform movement, trunk, legs, and arms.
And that's always at firm pressure, is it, that drill?
That's at medium pressure. Yeah, medium pressure. And the blade simply slips in. It just slips in quickly. There's no upward movement of the blade, so it's a 2-cycle blade movement rather than a 3-cycle blade movement. There's no upward movement of the blade. The blade comes back when it's fully extended, then the lower edge drops into the water. No upward motion. So the blade doesn't go up and then in and then pull. The blade simply goes in and pulls. Highly skilled.
It is. And as I can see, you take a lot of time and diligence practicing this regularly.
Highly skilled. You got to practice that every day. Yeah.
Now we have a next question from Niranjan, who has asked, what exercises do you use with an athlete who consistently rows short strokes?
Well, that correction really starts on the ergometer, where you go in and you do some choreography work with the athlete, that you ensure that the knees are in the proper place, that he's close to being or into the armpits with his trunk reach. So you've got reach from three points. You've got the seat. That's what the seat is for, is to give you a longer stroke. So the seat has to be fully placed. The knees are at the perpendicular when the seat is at full extension. Then you have the trunk, and then you have the arms. So you have to monitor those 3 points, the seat, the trunk, and the arms, and it would start on the erg for me.
And can you just talk us through what's the first thing you do with that athlete on the erg?
I would take him in and I would have him sit on the seat comfortably. I would make sure that he's fully he's using he's got core development and he's fully erect, and then have him come up to the front end, and then have him extend first with the trunk only, so that he's leaning forward towards the knees. Knees are closed. Knees are separated, maybe 2 hand widths apart. And then I would bring in the arms and have him reach with the trunk and the arms. And that's how I would begin, and then reinforce that when we go on the water, is do the same thing with him when he's on the water. But you've got to make sure the seat's placed exactly so it gives you that right angle with the knee position at the front end.
So the shins are vertical.
Shins are vertical, yep.
Good. Right. So our last question with regard to technique and drills is we have a questioner who has said, could you recommend a few practices for someone in a single scull who's training for head races and wants to improve their split times?
Oh. Well, one thing, I would get a measured distance. I'm doing that with the, we've got 2 channel markers on the canal, and I'm doing that on a regular basis with this master and this international sculler. And I'm just having them do that on a regular basis, once or twice a week, where they get a time. So you keep trying to improve the time over that distance. That would be the best thing. I mean, the problem on the canal, we don't have distances marked out. If we were rowing in a basin like Montreal or Burnaby or Canada or someplace in the United States where you had distances marked, then you could do that sort of training. You could do 250-meter splits. You could do 500-meter splits. We don't have the benefit of that here. But the point is to make sure your distance is consistent every time you take it.
I definitely support that. I've rowed and coached in places where we don't have a mark distance, but we have very clear marker points, and it's definitely the way to go. Absolutely. If anyone's read Brad Allen Lewis's book, Lido for Time, that title of that book came from a mark distance row, which he did, which was around the Lido Island, and he would time it.
Yes. What's the name of that book again?
Lido for Time.
For Time. And the author is?
Brad Allen Lewis. He was the guy who wrote The Assault on Lake Casitas.
Oh, yeah, Brad Lewis. Yeah, sure.
And
Brad.
It's his training diary of the year leading up to his Olympic gold medal, and that was one of his key repeating training sessions.
We had a good double going up against them, and sometimes they're winning and sometimes they're losing, but the double had very poor Olympics. They came in 6th. And we actually trained, and I received a note from thanking me. At Burnaby, we trained Lewis's partner.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, he came to a training session and he thanked me, and he thanked me because of the release.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Very, very interesting. Your reach goes wide and deep, Mr. Joy. So, moving on, I'd love to switch into psychology. Now, psychology for me was the first bit of becoming aware of your particular insight into rowing. And I'm going to kick off with my own question to start with, which is, what got you personally started in the idea of coaching the mind as well as the body in rowing, Jim?
I think it started, actually it started with, for me in college when I was a wrestler, and I would go out on the mat when we were in we had an away meet. I would go out before the match and then just feel my way on the mat. What I was doing was a mindfulness training. And I think that's where it started with me. And then when I started coaching, I got interested at Wesleyan in the early 70s. I got interested in yoga. which has the breathing, it has the posture, and it has the mental. Got interested in yoga and then and introduced it to the team. Some people picked it up, some people didn't. And then it went on from there. And then I just started reading and then practicing myself, doing the mental training myself on a regular basis. Just doing sitting.
For people who haven't read your books, can you just describe what you mean by mindfulness and what you mean by sitting?
Well, the quiet sitting is just a euphemism for mental training. It's meditating. You're doing a 5-minute, a 10-minute, a 20-minute, 30-minute sitting quietly in a quiet spot in your home. There's 5 exercises. There's the quiet sitting or mental training, meditation, the concentration, the relaxation, the visualization, and the mindfulness. The mindfulness is when you know what you're doing, when you're doing it, no matter what it is. And I've said that that's what you need when you do those high strokes. You've got to be aware of what is happening with each stroke, whether it's a good stroke, a bad stroke, a fair stroke. The concentration is basically focusing on a single item. The relaxation is the relaxing of the body, relaxing of the mind, and then the visualization. And this was the hardest one for me, and that's what I started doing, actually thinking about this. I started that before the wrestling. I started that with Fitzpatrick, the old coach, where he wanted me to see the stroke cycle. And that became difficult. I can do that today, but that was difficult at the time when he started to ask me to be able to see the stroke cycle in my mind. So it started really with the sculling.
And when you're talking about seeing the stroke cycle in your mind, are you seeing it through your own eyes as the athlete, or are you seeing it from above or the side as if you were a coach?
I'm basically seeing myself doing the stroke. I'm closing my eyes now and visualizing the stroke cycle as I would do it.
Mm-hmm. That's a great description, because for myself, that visualization is both seeing, hearing, and feeling. I know what it feels like to rock forward up the recovery. I know what it feels like as my knees rise and I feel my thighs pressing against my chest, and I know what it feels like when you lock on, and I also know what it sounds like.
I think that's a good ad. I think all those things I would incorporate in. I think that's excellent. Yeah, all those qualities.
Moving on to other questions around rowing psychology. Chris from Thames Tyrian UL in London has asked, what gives you more satisfaction, coaching a successful coach or coaching a successful crew?
Well, I think I've had the experience of both, and I have former athletes who are still coaching successfully. It's great pleasure in moving a coach to a higher level, and that's what I'm doing now with the present coach here at Hobart. Although he's had a fair amount of experience, and still he's picking up a lot from comments I'm making. But I really like to work the one-on-one with the athlete and the sculling. I think that's the ultimate, to get them to getting one person to the optimal level. I think that is the greatest satisfaction.
How do you quantify success then?
Success, I sort of reject. I really reject our use of that word. To me, success is getting the optimal performance from the person, and there's all levels of that. It's not something that you can say explicitly, this person is successful, this person is not. But I guess I'm quite humanistic in that respect.
Very interesting. Our next question is from Lewis from Des Moines Rowing Club, and he says, how can coaches motivate rowers who have low self-esteem?
I think this is a very good question. And what I suggest is that have them experience there must be something that they can do well. Some success, have them have some success in a peripheral aspect of the rowing, strength training or running or rope jumping or body weights or erg or running hills or running long distance. Let them have them or on the erg, have them experience this success and then build on it. Have them read some success stories like Roger Bannister, what Bannister went through to see the trials and success of this man. And then finally just have enormous patience with these people. Enormous patience.
That's certainly interesting. And from my own experience, I can add that I think low self-esteem I can handle as a coach. The thing that I find hardest is the person who likes to see themselves as a victim, because it's very hard to reason with them. Their interpretation of facts is very biased, in my opinion.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
I haven't figured that one out. If you have any insights, I'm always listening.
Yeah. Well, I think you'd have to pick something like the erg and see what they can do. See what they can do in terms of the score, knowing where you're going to go with that person would be an immediate feedback for the person.
I try to pick out things that they can take to be a good achievement. For example, holding a consistent split for however long the piece is on the erg.
Yeah.
And then you can, of course, then address the whole group and maybe note to the whole group the person with the most improved average score. And of course, the opportunity for the person who is not necessarily with low esteem, but also perhaps at the bottom of the group in terms of their trained physiology, they can be seen to make quite rapid improvements. And of course, it then draws them to the notice of the rest of the group that this athlete is improving.
Yes. Yep.
We now have a great question that's come in from Nicholas from Vesta Rowing Club in London. He's asked, when it comes to top-level competition, has flow and aesthetic been overwhelmed by physiology and power?
Well, yes, it has. You only have to go to Rule 2K and see the contorted movement patterns at all levels. It's there. The evidence is there. I wrote down, I can send him my presentation on efficient movement. If he writes me, I can send it to him.
Actually, Jim, if you send it to me, I can share it afterwards with everybody who's listening.
Oh, that's great. I'll send it to you then. Yep. And it's definitely there. I would say more the power coming from the erg, the expression of power, rather than a controlled power that you were talking about. The physiology, you can't dispute that. It's fine. You just have to use the physiology, and that's a positive. But it's the abuse of power at the expense of the fine movement, which I now call movement patterns, and that leads movement patterns that lead to flow.
Do you want to amplify further on that? How to develop flow?
The flow, for example, there's just about an example, an international example that comes quickly to mind is the German quad that has won a number of years and won in 212. They just rowed terribly, and there's other reasons for their winning, and one is the competition level, and two is the amount of time that they're together, they're successful. But it's just, and I can't think of exactly. I've seen the movie of the video of the quad. It was just terrible rowing. The flow comes from the consistency in four places of the stroke cycle. It comes from the entry, the drive, the release, and follow through, and then the recovery. And everything is moving in the stroke cycle. There's no setting of the body angle on the recovery. For example, it's a body swing that translates into a glide forward eventually. There's the two-handed release. There's the quick entry, and then the pull what you can handle drive. So there's no straining in the drive. And that's why the woman says this feels a lot easier. And all those elements then lead to the flow situation. And here at the school, when I was coaching at the school at William Smith, they came to me about 10 or 12 times and said, we experienced flow today. We didn't experience any physical strain or discomfort until we got into the cars to drive home.
Fantastic. That's a great recognition with an anecdote of exactly what the net outcome should be from a successful practice.
Yeah, they did it under championship play as well. I remember when we raced the University of Virginia, and the University of Virginia, some of the athletes had to go to the hospital after the race, and our kids just jumped out of the boat and said, that's a great race. And we experienced flow in that race.
We're going to pause now and share our sponsor's message for today. RowingChat is brought to you by Coxmate, building the best equipment for coxswains. The Coxmate SX amplifier comes with a GPS so that you can measure the speed of your boat and find out whether your calls are helping the crew to go faster. For example, when the coxswain steers the boat, you know that the speed drops. But when the rudder is back straight, are you checking that the crew is back to the same speed? With Coxmate's large display and backlit screen, you can cox effectively even in the dark. After each outing, download the speed data, and the coach can review each piece, graph your speed, and confirm whether the coxing calls are effective. Coxmates are available for demonstration trial from RowPerfect UK and other local agents worldwide. Now, Jim, back into the questions. Chris Leonard from Greenwich Water Club has asked, have you got any advice for people who are considering a career change to become a rowing coach?
This is a little difficult one because I've always been a coach with some teaching of history added at times to my plate. I would not encourage people to switch unless they've had a good grounding in coaching. I had a 15-year apprenticeship with a master coach who sent me to the United States with a book of notes on all aspects of rowing or sculling. So they need that grounding, and I think usually I'll tell people to combine teaching and coaching. In other words, at a small private school or club and then do coaching on the side. But the professional coaching is difficult. I don't think I would have changed my life, but it certainly was difficult, especially in Canada with the amount of traveling, 4 months away, traveling. Very difficult to maintain a family that way. So this is kind of a difficult question for me.
It's a very timely question because tomorrow on the Row Perfect blog, we actually have written an article giving some direction to a couple of other places where particularly Mike Davenport has written a great piece on how to help you work out for yourself what is right for you. And he kicks off his article with a question. What's the difference between a rowing coach and a jumbo-sized pizza? And the answer is, A jumbo-sized pizza feeds a family of 4.
Yeah, it's not, I asked that question. To Stork Sanford at the St. Catherine's Captain's Dinner years ago, and he looked down at me. He was 6'6", and he said, "Sonny," he said, "forget about it. There's no money in professional coaching." And I wish I could resurrect Stork and said, well, I made a living at it and for over 50 years and still doing coaching. But it's, I sort of miss my years at Yale where I was coaching in the afternoon and then doing a full load of teaching of history in the morning. And I think that was a nice combination.
Times are changing, and certainly for you, Jim, you have forged the way in making the coaching pay. I think that some other people, there are now coaching pathways to be developed as a professional, but also to get paid in a lot of different ways.
Oh yeah, I mean the pay now is significantly different than it was 40 years ago. Absolutely, it's wonderful that way.
We have another question on the theme of coaching from Suzanne from Inverness Rowing Club. She has said, please can you advise on rigging for junior girls?
Yeah, is that Inverness, Scotland?
It is. I know Suzanne. In fact, I have raced against her. She's a high-quality athlete and a very good coach.
Wow, that's a beautiful area of Scotland. I would the one thing I have for juniors, and I would say, and I haven't coached juniors, is you would start with the spread in the single at 160 centimeters and in the 8 at 84.
And you say start there. Do you want to amplify on that?
Well, I would start there, and then keeping them over the keel line in the 8, I would move that spread in and then reduce the length of the oar.
And as the athletes get older, do you make changes?
Not too much. No, they're pretty standard with that. The other thing I would advise her to do is I'm a great supporter of Paul Thompson, to get his book. He has all these measurements in his book. He's working with it all the time. And Paul's a great resource.
Yeah, it's Paul Thompson, and the book is called Sculling.
Sculling, and and Paul's a native of Australia. All good coaches come out of Australia.
Many good coaches come from other places as well. It is one of the things, though, I've noticed that the Antipodes export their coaching talent. They don't hold it all back at home. And obviously us and the rest of the world are grateful for that. Yeah,
there's a lot of Canadians here in the U.S. There's not too many Americans going north. I can't think of any. American coaches pretty much stay in the U.S., but Canadians and Australians and New Zealanders all tend to move. And a few of the British move too.
Moving on to another question from Rachel at Shell Harbour City Rowing Club. She says, have you a suggestion of a way to fix technique on the erg to stop back pain?
Well, this is, in 40 years of college coaching, I had people come with back problems, but never had back problems develop. And I don't think it starts on the erg. I think it starts in the boat, that you get the person to stay over the keel. We're doing this, and we've got it pretty much solved we get a lot of people come from different schools, and a lot of them lean in to the oarlock. We have no leaning into the oarlock. The knees are solid underneath them, and then we narrow the spread. So they stay over the keel, and I think that corrects the twisting, the twisting and the torquing that you get at the entry, where you're twisting and you're putting this tremendous load on the body.
So,
And
so the fix is coming from rowing correctly in the boat
absolutely.
back then to training on the erg.
Into training, it goes in that direction. It doesn't go from the erg to the boat. It goes from the boat to the erg. And I know that Al Morrow, he basically disagrees with this. His kids do a fan-like effect, like they're Leslie Thompson in the 8 is looking right down the 8 when they're all at the front at the entry. She's looking right down the boat because they're so far out. But Al says don't do this for young athletes. They're overreaching, and they're leaning into the oarlock. And I think that's the. They're not sitting. They're not. When I'm just sitting here. They're in the seat here. They're not sitting on the seat properly. They don't have equal weight distribution over their seat. So their sitting posture is not good. As soon as you lean towards the rigger, then you come off the butt on one side of your body. And so you're not in a consolidated position when you're taking the load. And I think this is what's causing the problem, because we have more back injuries today than we've ever had. So what we've done with the kids at Hobart, we've got them back over the keel line, and then we've reduced the spread, and along with that, so they're rowing with a narrower spread. They're rowing around 82 centimeters on their spread, 82, 1.5.
And these athletes are 19 years old and above.
They're 19 and above, yes. And it's worse with juniors, and that's what Al was saying. He said, I mean, I give him credit there. He said, I wouldn't advise this for junior rowing because there's too much work on the body.
Is the seat height affected in any way with the juniors?
The seat height.
Do you have a recommended height? I think the questioner means from the oarlock down to the top of the seat. What measurement do you use?
I think I have to go back. I'd start with here's where I'd have to go out of the metric and go to around 6 inches.
Okay.
I think that's what I recall.
So 6 inches would be around 15 centimeters.
Yeah.
Okay. So I have a question, this is my own one from a lady with whom I row, and she's a mature lady, and she says, how do you stop the voices in your head? She said she finds that she's always talking to herself. She's
got to do more and more quiet sitting, and we're looking at the calendar on this, that she's got to do this over and over again and start with small segments. Start and see what she can do for a minute, see what she can do for 2 minutes, to have nothing floating through her head. But if they do come in, then she doesn't. The problem is she's holding on to them as well, and she's probably answering herself in her head. And what she's got to do is just let them drift through, and that's the start. And then after a while, they don't drift through. They're not there anymore.
I will pass the message on. Now I'm getting ready to open up to questions from the audience. We'll use the chat technique, so just type out any questions that you have into the chat screen. In the meantime, Jim, I'd like to ask you something about rowing in the US and possibly also in Canada. It seems to me as an outsider that sweep is the dominant format, and am I right, there are no sculling races at university rowing championships in the US? Do you have any reflection or observations about the health of that?
Yeah, there is sculling races in the Dad Vale Championships, which is for smaller colleges in the United States. And that race is the second weekend in May in Philadelphia. So they do have sculling races now, but that's the only one in existence. In the Canadian system, with the universities, they come with 12 athletes and they compete in a double, quad, and 8, maybe in the single. So they do have sculling in their university championships. And of course, sculling is since the early '80s when we started the small boat clinics with across Canada, that sculling has been promoted and is much more widespread in Canada than the United States.
Does this reflect on their international results, do you think?
Oh, definitely, yes. Like, for example, Andrew Burns, who was in the 208 and the 208 and then the 212 Olympics for Canada, came in 204 to Geneva. He had about 13 practices with me because he had just been told to go home and learn how to scull. He had dual citizenship, so he was in a senior B camp in Canada in 204. He came to Geneva. He lived in Ithaca, so it's an hour away, so I'd go down to Ithaca or he'd come up here. So I basically taught him how to scull. He went back to Canada in 205 and made the senior B8 in 206. He was in the Cox pair, won a bronze medal. In 207 and 208, he was in the gold medal eights. Yeah.
So you think that sculling is advantageous, I'm guessing, from that?
In Spracklen, when I went to Victoria in 208, I went to Victoria and then I went to London to see the practices. Spracklen had people out in pairs and singles, so he did a lot of this. It was the basis, the technical basis for the 8 racing, no question. And I don't think they do as much in the States. They're doing more. They're doing more of it now, especially with the women are doing more of it now, doing the pairs.
So we have a question here from Chris, who says, at the catch, once the blade is buried, do you coach a progressive acceleration or do you hit the catch hard and hold on to it?
The entry, what I do emphasize is a feeling of an even pressure throughout the drive. Now, the elementary physics on that, if you're feeling an even pressure, without saying anything, you're accelerating as you move towards the bow. To keep that pressure feeling even. And I know one year getting ready for a camp, I was floating through part of the drive. The end of the drive seemed to be floating through, and whatever I did, I made the pressure feel the same at the entry as well as at the release.
That's very clear. And in fact, the questioner has just responded to say that he was in Mike Spracklin's first medal 8, and he selected that crew largely on sculling. So there you go. Yeah. Mr. Spracklin doesn't change his techniques.
No.
In a race, often you hit what's called the wall, which is maybe 30, 40 seconds into the race. Do you have any advice for mentally how to deal with hitting the wall?
It's been too long. I remember hitting it though, but it's been too long. I remember hitting it later where I increased my stroke rate without the coach knowing it in the course of a race, and I was doing wonderfully well until about 20 strokes to the finish, and then I really hit the wall, and I was in cuckoo land. I didn't know what was going on, and I finished the race, came over to the dock. My father did a little bit of recovery work with me. I won't say what he did, and then sent me out for a short race, which I won to qualify for the next day. But I just, I just couldn't. I mean, there I really hit the wall. That my body was completely depleted.
Mental training is quite fashionable now. How do you translate what you're teaching athletes in their rowing to take into other spheres of their life?
Well, I think it has a direct I tell them it has a direct correlation to the classroom, and in that they're sitting around a round table and they're having to make a presentation, and if they're anxious without the people around them knowing they can do deep breathing and do a short concentration and then give their speech. So it has direct, and then the focusing, the ability to focus has a direct bearing on their academic performance.
That's great. We have a follow-up question with regard to your observations about the 84 centimetre spread for a junior girl's 8. The question asked, what kind of blades and oar lengths are you using?
Oh, that's a tough one. What type of blades? It's just a standard blade. I've gone through that with the master scholar who was using a fatty blade, and so we went from the fatty blade to just a standard blade. That's the only two blades I know, I'm aware of. And of oar length, that's a tough one. I'm not sure. I can't answer that.
Not a problem.
I'm not sure what he's using. I'm not sure what the woman is using. But I'm having to go back to this. I'm going to have to go back to this now that I'm doing these scullers again. I'm going to have to go back to this and basically, I think with the oar length, it probably in terms of meters would be around 285s.
That's for sculling, and then for sweep?
For sweep, this is for the juniors?
Yes, the
It's be 371s.
371. We now have somebody who's clearly in training for the head of the Charles Regatta, and they've said, could you address recommended single scull practice distances for a master's sculler for the head of the Charles?
Yeah, I got something here. I've got a whole program, a weekly program. We do, on Monday, we do 60 minutes at 24, every 20 minutes, every 10 minutes, do 2 minutes at 28. On Tuesday, and then in the afternoon, it's weights, 3 sets of 10. On Tuesday in the morning, it's 4 minutes at 24, 4 minutes at 28 times 5 continuous. That's a tough one, and that's called redlining. You're a little bit below anaerobic threshold, a little bit above. And that is the purpose of that, is to raise the anaerobic threshold. And then there's Wednesday morning is above anaerobic threshold, 180, 200 heart rate for Lindsay, who's the woman sculler. That's 4 to 6 times 5 minutes, 4 to 6 times 5 minutes at 28 to 30 strokes per minute. 5 minutes light paddling between pieces. And for Vince, who's older, it's 160, and this would affect the masters, 160 to 170 heart rate, 4 to 6 times 5 minutes, 4 to 6, 5 minutes light paddle between pieces. Thursday is, and then in the afternoon is sets of weights. Then Thursday AM is light paddle firm, light firm, full pressure, 3 minutes for each. Light at 22, firm at 26, full at 30 strokes per minute times 4. 4 minutes off between sets working on establishing ribbing. Then in the PM is steady state, changing every 12 minutes, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28. And then on, well, that's it. Friday is technique day on the canal, and then Saturday is steady state, 2 times 45 minutes at 22, 20 minutes, 10 minutes light. And then Sunday, it's 15 kilometers, 15 to 20 kilometers at steady state, 22 to 28. There's no schedule, spontaneous, just skull on how you feel, living intimately with nature around you. And that's an exercise taken from Bannister, where he simply went out and ran. He went out and ran near the ocean and ended up in covered with perspiration. But he just enjoyed the running, just enjoyed being outside.
I think that there's definitely a lot of that in rowing, and certainly there are people who prefer to be in the boat and outdoors with nature than being indoors.
Yes, in all weather. I used to say to the athletes living here in Western New York, you had to be a Viking, much like the Vikings. You had to be outdoors in open boats going across the Atlantic.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that.
Yeah.
I've got a question here with regard to your mental training. How receptive are different age groups to mind tutoring?
Oh, I've never seen any. I mean, I've done this with juniors at the Craftsbury Sculling Camp, and at Black Bear Sculling Camp. They just go and sit, and especially today, I think they're looking for some silent periods in their life with all the technology that we're faced with today. I think they react very positively. And the same way with Vince, who's 59, he reacts very positively. Lindsay, who is 28, reacts very positively to the mental training. So I don't think there's anything that you can say that one particular age group will not take to this. I think it's not true. I think it's embraced by everyone.
We have a reflection back on your training program about steady state at 22 to 28. He says this is hard work and is amazed. Do you do any low rate UT3, 14 to 18 rate, concentrating on catches and technique?
Yeah, I haven't done. I've done low rate, and I've always done. I just noticed that in Burnell's book on the Oxford textbook of sculling, he recommended slow rate rowing, which was down around 10 to 18 strokes. I call it slow motion rowing, which is really the Tai Chi of rowing. So we do a lot of that. And I don't have any of it in right now, but I would do those 14 to 18 strokes per minute. Yes. Yep.
So then a question about your steady state. When you say it's rate 22 to 28, can the athlete choose what rate they do?
Yeah, the 22 to 28, the athlete is completely in control of that practice. So how many strokes they do at 22 or how many they do at 28 is entirely up to the person. It's spontaneous. It's just completely away from a schedule. So we're doing it once a week.
Very interesting.
Yep.
Now, just to wrap up, I'd like to remind everybody who's on the call that rowperfect.co.uk sells both of Jim's books, and we actually have them available as a bundle, and the URL is up on the screen now to show you exactly where to go if you haven't yet bought them. I commend them both. We have written up reviews of both books in the Row Perfect blog news archive, which you can search for. And I have enjoyed hugely meeting you, Jim, and having the opportunity to lead this chat with you. Thank you very much for giving us your time.
Well, thank you, Rebecca, and you've done a great job with this.
Well, thank you very much.
You've done wonderful. Very easy to work with you.
Well, that's a very kind thing to say. And everyone who's on the call, if you can help us spread the word about RowingChat, we appreciate it. If you can tell your clubmates that this exists, we'd like to get, firstly, more listeners, but secondly, any recommendations you may have of athletes or coxswains or coaches or people associated with rowing in another way who you would be interested in hearing more about their life, their ideas on rowing, please send them through to us, and we will approach them and see if they would like to join us and be interviewed.